Hey, what's up everybody? This is Osterberg501 and today I want to go over my Graveborn slash Spellshot spell focused build in Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. Now this is going to be more of a glitch build because I am using the Buff Meister in this build, which if you don't know is a spell that's currently kind of broken in how it's interacting with using the Ambihextrous action skill ability. So this will be a bit more of a glitch build, but I will have a version of this build that isn't using that specific spell later down the road. So if you don't want to use this item that's probably going to get nerfed at some point, you can look at that future build I'll be releasing. So for our class spell feats, the Graveborn gets the Demi Lich Companion, which will just deal dark magic damage to enemies, and anytime you cast a spell, it will cast a Hellish Blast that homes on enemies and does an AoE blast of the spell's element that you just used, and this Hellish Blast actually does quite a bit of damage. Then we have Spell Weaving. Anytime we reload or cast a spell, we gain a stack of Spell Weaving that increases our spell damage, stacks up 5 times at a baseline, and every stack lasts for 10 seconds, so it's not a refreshing stack, but with this build you can have this up pretty much 100% of the time at maximum stacks. And for the action skill we're using Ambihextrous, which allows us to remove our action skill and replace it with a second spell slot. So then for our passives, we're putting 5 points into Essence Drain. Spell cooldown rate on a kill skill is pretty massive, and we're going to want to be shooting off spells as much as we possibly can. 3 points into Sanguine Sacrament. Every time we cast a spell, we heal for 15% of our health over 2 seconds. Very strong survivability. Then we have 2 points in a Dark Pact, which just increases our dark magic damage. Dark magic damage is a big chunk of our damage in this build, and you'll see that more as we go into more talents and some of our items. Then we have 1 point into Dread Covenant. This redirects 35% of our damage to our Demi Lich, and then if we would go down to 1 health instead of being killed, we would sacrifice our Demi Lich, restoring 75% of our max health, killing our Demi Lich, and this is on a 120-second cooldown. Now I'm not 100% sure, and this is really hard to test, but I think you're still getting the damage reduction while your Demi Lich is dead. I'm not 100% sure on that, but it does feel like you're still getting that damage reduction even when your Demi Lich is already dead. Then 2 points into Stain of the Soul, which adds bonus dark magic damage onto our spells. Again, dark magic damage is a big portion of our build, and we also have some increases to it, so this is just dealing additional damage. Then we have 3 points in a Dark Hydra, a kill skill. When we kill something, we summon a Dark Hydra or have a 6% chance to summon it. We can have 3 of these Dark Hydras up at a time. They last 10 seconds, and they just shoot dark magic projectiles at enemies. And these do get buffed by a lot of our other spells and abilities and the Buff Meister, so these will start to deal a ton of damage when we have all of our buffs up and have our Buff Meister going. Then we have 3 points into Ascension, another kill skill, increases our maximum health and spell damage, stacks up 10 times, lasts 30 seconds, so this will be up pretty much 100% of the time, and it will just give us a massive amount of health and spell damage increases. Then we have Punishment. This just gives our Demi Lich's Hellish Blast a chance to be cast a second time, 20% chance to do that. Pretty massive. Like I mentioned, the Hellish Blast actually deals a ton of damage. Then we have Lord of Edges. You gain increased damage dealt and damage reduction the lower your health is, at a max of 25% damage dealt and 25% damage reduction. It is a pretty bursty and glass cannon type of build, so this thing will be giving you good bonuses a good chunk of the time. Then we have 5 points into Blast Gasp. Whenever you deal spell damage, there's a chance you'll create an elemental explosion, which deals ability damage of that spell's element. It can't critically hit, has a 20% chance to proc, and deals 50% of spell damage dealt, so just an additional proc to do a bunch of AoE damage. Then one of our most important passives, Morheim's Blessing. When you cast a spell, you activate all of your kill skills. So our Ascension, our Dark Hydras, our Essence Drain will be up 100% of the time because we're casting spells so much. Then we're going 5 points into Spell Sniper, increases your spell critical hit chance. Pretty massive critical hit chance increase for our spells. Our spells will be critting all of the time. Then 5 points into Font of Mana. We get spell cooldown rate. We don't have an action skill, so that doesn't affect us. And this mixed with Essence Drain are very important because we want to be casting these spells as much as possible. This is the majority of our damage, and this is quite a bit of our survivability and sustain as well. Then we have Mage Armor. Whenever you gain a stack of Spell Weaving, 10% of your ward is restored. Now we gain Spell Weaving anytime we reload a weapon or cast a spell, so we're constantly regenning ward on a pretty consistent basis. Then I have 5 points into Just Warming Up. We gain increased fire rate for every stack of Spell Weaving, and we have 4 points, so 3.2% increased fire rate for every stack. And with all of our passives, we're able to have 8 stacks total, so this is just massive fire rate increases. Then we're using Glass Cannon. Our ward can't regenerate normally, but we gain increased spell damage by 30%. Now this is just automatic recharges of our wards, but with Mage Armor, we're still regenning wards every time we gain Spell Weaving, so we're still gaining a lot of ward on a pretty consistent basis. Then we have 1 point into High Thread Count, increases our Spell Weaving max stacks by 3, so now we can have 8 stacks of Spell Weaving, which just synergizes with a ton of our build. We're gaining increased fire rate, we're getting increased spell damage, we're regenerating wards. Really good synergy between a lot of our other passives. And then our hero stat points are pretty simple. We max out as much as we could go into intelligence, then we max out as much as we could go into dexterity, and then the rest of our points are in the strength. So intelligence is spell cooldown, dexterity is just base crit chance, and then strength is crit damage. And we chose nerd for our archetype, which increases our intelligence. The main thing, it also increases wisdom, but the main thing we want it for is intelligence, because we want as low as cooldowns as possible for our spells. Now for our myth ranks, you pretty much just want to be putting as many points as you can into your base hero stats, so intelligence, dexterity, strength, as much as you can. So in Archmage, you want to max out intelligence, 10 points. Blade Master, you can max out strength. I actually maxed out constitution instead, so we're a bit tankier. Then you can max out strength. Deadeye, max out dexterity. And then for Druid, I have been maxing out loot luck. Even though this isn't giving us power increases, I think this is completely worth it. It's 5% loot luck every point up to a maximum of 20. And those are kind of the main stats you can go into first. Past that, you can just put points into whatever you want. In Archage, you have spell crit damage, you have spell crit chance, you have spell damage at the end, which is the infinite talent points. For Blade Master, the main damage increase you're going to be getting is dark magic damage increases. This is going to be pretty good for this build. For Deadeye, you can do pretty much whatever. I was putting points into gun damage, but I think what would be much better for this build is magazine size or fire rate. Those would probably both be pretty good. And then for Druid, you actually don't have much that's that great to put into after your loot luck. Companion damage can be all right, but pretty much everything else isn't going to be that big a boost to our build, so you can put in points to whatever you want in the Druid tree. And the most important part of the gear for this specific version of this build, like I mentioned, is going to be the Buff Meister. If you don't know about this item, it's currently broken, and how this item works is when you activate it, it increases the base damage dealt by all of your direct damage by the damage of the spell. So normally it'd just be by 168, would still be decent, but not that crazy. But if you're using Ambihextrous, so you can have 2 spell slots, it's actually taking the damage increase that it gives you and taking that as the damage from your primary spot spell. So when I use Buff Meister, instead of getting an increase of 168 to our base damage, it's going to give us an increase of 2,653 because that's what the damage of my main slot spell is. So essentially all you want is the highest single damage spell you can get for your main slot spell or your left spell slot. And don't use spells that are times damage. So say if you have 200 times 12 as a spell, don't use that because the times 12 doesn't get factored in correctly with the Buff Meister. So just get the single biggest damage you can get. So then for the melee weapon I'm using, I'm currently using the Spellblade. Now the special of this is that your melee attacks deal spell damage now, so they're going to do a lot more damage. But the main thing is when you melee attack something, you gain spell critical hit chance increase by 80% for 6 seconds. So a pretty big crit chance increase for our spells. That's the main reason I'm using it. I actually don't keep this buff up all of the time either, but this is the best weapon I have found for a build like this. And you can definitely keep it up more if you focus on doing that. Now for our weapons, the main things I'm using is the Queen's Cry, which I went over in a previous video. I'd recommend checking that out. This thing's absolutely ridiculous for just pure damage dealt when our Buff Meister is procced. And this is my boss killer. It just shreds bosses. This weapon mixed with this build, mixed with the Buff Meister, is ridiculous. And Mayhem 20, you're just shredding through boss health. Then for our more AoE damage and clearing out chaos dungeons, clearing out packs of enemies, I usually use these live wire SMGs. Now essentially what these do is every time you shoot, it has a chance to proc lightning that jumps between enemies. And because it shoots so fast, you're essentially constantly having lightning lightning arcing to all the different enemies, and all of that arcing lightning damage is also being buffed by your buff Meister. So you're just doing massive AoE damage to all these different enemies. It's really good for clearing out big packs of enemies, especially if you're in those Chaos Chamber levels where it's all just the flying eye enemies or other flying enemies. This is really good. Really easy to just arc that damage between everything, pop your buff Meister, and do massive AoE damage with it. So Livewire for AoE and Queen's Cry for single target. And if you don't have those weapons, pretty much any weapon that shoots very quickly is going to be good for this build. The buff Meister buffs base damage, so getting a lot of shots is going to be very good. Anything that shoots multiple pellets is going to be really good. So say the Red Helion, which I also did a video going over. This is also very good, especially for boss kills. This thing isn't as good as a Queen's Cry, but this is still absolutely ridiculous amount of burst damage. So any weapon similar to that is going to be a good fit for this build. Then for our other pieces, I don't actually have that good of rolls on most of my other gear. Now for my necklace, I'm currently using the Brad Luck, which is a legendary necklace. It gives you 30% loot luck at level 40. That's the main thing it does, but it has a negative effect where every 8 seconds you get a bad effect applied to you. And usually this is like a damage proc that just hurts you. And you have to be careful if you want to use this as well, because it seems the buff Meister's damage boosting also affects this negative effect that is applied to you. So you can take quite a bit of damage from this. Sometimes it just ends up killing me or putting me into save my soul. So it's a much riskier item to use. But if you want that increased loot luck, you can use this. I currently don't really have a good replacement for this for pure power, but anything focused on spell damage, crit damage is all going to be pretty good for this build. For my shield, I'm using the Empowering Mine rune. Now this has a pretty good capacity of a shield, which I do like. And the special of this is when you cast a spell, you summon a frost rune under a nearby enemy that explodes after a short delay. This has a short cooldown, and this is pretty nice because it synergizes with our build. We're now spawning these frost runes on our enemies that when buffed by the Buffmeister do a ton of damage as well. And if you don't have this specific shield, pretty much anything that's going to make you tanky or anything that's going to synergize with spells is going to be pretty good. For our rings are kind of trash. This top one's okay. Pretty much any legendary ring that you can have the bonus effect procced a lot of the time is going to be good. Anything to do with spells, so we have spell crit hit chance on this, we have spell damage on this ring, anything that just focuses on your spells is going to be pretty good. And then for our armor piece, this is actually a very good legendary for this build. So this Lich's Corrupted Plate Mail has the special of you convert 30% of your Fate Maker's damage dealt to dark magic damage, and your dark magic efficiency is increased by 30%. So like I mentioned, a lot of our stuff is dark magic damage. We have a bunch of buffs to dark magic damage in our skills. When you apply the dark magic status effect to enemies, that heals you every time it procs. And this is just turning more of our damage into dark magic damage. So this is very good. This one I have also gave us 3 additional points into Essence Drain, which is our kill skill that gives us spell cooldown rate increases. So that is pretty massive as well. And I got decent rolls. I got Graveborn and Spellshot power on it, spell damage and all damage dealt increases. So this is a pretty well rolled armor piece. Got maximum health increase as well, which isn't actually that bad because this is more of a bursty, more glass cannon-y type of build. So any health or ward increases are also going to be pretty helpful for staying alive. And also I didn't mention this, but the Buffmeister can be in any element. Mine is currently dark magic damage, so that just synergizes well with our build, but any Buffmeister, no matter the element, is going to be really good. So that's pretty much the entirety of this build. Like I mentioned, more of a glitch build using the Buffmeister, but I will be having another build that's very, very similar to this without using the Buffmeister. So if you don't want to use an item that's clearly doing a lot more damage than it's originally intended to be doing, you can wait for that build, and that build will be much more focused on purely dealing damage with your spells and just being a machine gun of shooting out different spells. But that's all I want to go over for this build. So subscribe if you want to see more Wonderlands or other videos. Leave a like if you liked the video. Leave a comment down below what you guys think about this spell build, and thanks for watching.
Devastation inbound! magic begin! Possibly lethal for you, son. Turn back now, you might survive. The champion returns to the field. Fields to be had. Top dog. From beyond the veil, to my side. The end draws near. Ha! Keep them coming! I can cast again! A fine collection! Shall we continue?